Okay, welcome to the 2-month review. This is our weekly podcast from Open Letter Books at the University of Rochester, where we take one book and read it bit by bit, section by section over a 2-month period, talking about it in a fun and entertaining way, diving into the book, getting some backstories to it, just having a good time reading these books and talking about them. And this week, I'm joined as always by Brian Wood.
Hi, Chad. That's a really boring intro, by the way.
I know.
It's like the same thing as every single week. I mean, I get you want to have consistency, but consistently bad may not be the best way. But hey, glad to be here.
I think the problem was that this week I didn't drink beforehand. That's the problem.
I know. Well, if you're thinking that you're going to have to go to the hospital, then all of a sudden you have to do a fun podcast. I guess it's different, right?
Yeah, it's true. Like, there's literally a chance that in the middle of this, we will have to stop it to go have a baby.
Yeah, not us.
Not you guys.
You guys.
Yeah, not me really either.
Right.
And the other person is Nick Buzanski, who is from Book Culture in New York City, but he's also previously worked at The Strand and at Green Apple Books.
Hello, everyone.
And Nick is already a YouTube star.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I don't think that's how anybody would describe it.
What's the story behind that? Describe what?
Well, many years ago, we started some YouTube videos for Green Apple Books that, unfortunately, I was in and had responsibilities of creating and other things, but. Anyway,
they're amazing.
There is something else, that's for sure.
I'll look them up.
There's one that's is the first time that any of our books was ever on YouTube, where you guys did a series of ones that were like the Kindle versus the book. There's like a 10-round fight, and there's one where it's like the Kindle, because someone comes into the Kindle and is like, I'm looking for a book for my boyfriend, and you're like, what do they like? And they're like, oh, well, they're like Lithuanian and they like vampire zombie things. And you type it into Google or onto Kindle and nothing comes up. And like, well, no books there. Yeah. And then they replay it and she comes in and is like, yeah, I'm looking for like a zombie book about Lithuania. And you're like, bring Vilnius Poker.
Yeah, well, Steven Sparks always had his touch on those. They were definitely, that was, I think, definitely the most watched of that series.
I show it to my students every semester.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
That's super embarrassing, but great.
And now they're probably watching you on this.
Oh, they actually do that, or they just tell you that they show up?
Well, right now 3 people are watching. It's probably not my students. I don't know. They sometimes say they show up, but I think they're usually.
Would that 3 people be us because we're logged on?
No, because you guys aren't watching it on YouTube.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, cool. Well,
I assume not. I assume you're just watching it straight, because that would be really confusing.
Yeah.
Just jumped up our viewership by 100%. Nowhere to go but up.
So how are things? How long have you been at Book Culture now?
Going just over 2.5 years. So nice. Be 3 years in July. Yeah.
Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about the store? Because I don't know if everyone knows.
Yeah, I'm very ignorant.
Yeah, Book Culture, it started as Labyrinth Books about 20 years ago. It's on 112th Street between Broadway and Amsterdam. So the idea was to bring an independent bookstore to cater to the professors and the students of Columbia University. And after some time, one of the owners left. He took Labyrinth Books, which went to Princeton, New Jersey, and one of the other original owners switched the name to Book Culture. Since then, we've opened up 3 stores. So we've got one on 114th and Broadway, one on 81st and Columbus, which obviously does really well for us. And then we just opened up a brand new store in Long Island City, right off of Court Square on Jackson Avenue.
Wow.
So the idea is to bring, cater to the bookstore community. The 112th Street store is the more academic store. It's the one that caters to that sort of community. But each one, I feel like, is more of a highbrow new bookstore that, we bring, interesting gifts, books. But, the culture of books, what we believe in is, having people who read to sell those books and not just people there to ring people up and get, so actually, hand people good books and feature good books such as Open Letter and NYRB and New Directions, etc.
This book,
like this one.
It's a good plug right there.
Yeah, right.
I had my students today talk about what they would do for a bookstore or what they want out of a bookstore, and not one of them mentioned like a good sales staff. And I pointed it out at the end. I was like, so staff recommendations, people who know things about books, and they're like, oh yeah, I guess maybe that would probably be okay.
I feel like that's something that I've seen is the only thing that's continuing to help the independent bookstore through the Amazon terror and the box stores that we went through is strong booksellers who care about books and actually have something to say about them.
Yeah.
I wrote a recommendation today for one of my booksellers. She's trying to go for the Bink Scholarship.
Oh.
She's going to be going back to school, but she's one of those people, she's young. She graduated from NYU before she came to book culture, studies theater, but she just absorbs books, and she looks for new presses and new women Irish authors and random stuff, and and it's like those people are hard to find, and I feel like cultivating a staff that really believes in books and book selling is 90%.
Imagine
it's
that.
hard, but it's like we
true.
can't. We're not paying a ton of money here. We can't pay much over minimum wage. So to find somebody that has that passion is hard.
Yeah.
And luckily I'm by Columbia, so we see people come through. But keeping them, cultivating them, turning them into managers, and having them pass that on, is really like the important work. Since nobody's making a ton of money off it.
I think if I opened a bookstore, I would probably start with tote bags, and then from there expand to Minecraft toys. At some point, I think good staff would be on that list, though.
Yeah,
the first thing they mentioned was having sidelines like journals, because when people are in bookstores, they're inspired to write.
Oh, good. There you go.
We just put up a new small press display down by the door, which is mostly zines and like Ugly Duckling, things like that. And the first thing I did was I had this shelf on the bottom that was just kind of wasted space that wasn't going to be working for that. First thing I did was put decomposition notebooks there. Hey, you like this little book? You can write your one yourself. Hold it up, staple it. You can sell it, right?
That's how publishing works. That's exactly how publishing works.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the other side. I just assume that's how it works.
That's pretty much perfect. So you two have a lot in common too, because you're both from the Bay Area.
All right.
Which I always wanted to introduce both of you for that reason, because you're both two of the funniest people I know. So
which part of Hudson Bay, or is it Tampa Bay? Those are the bays.
No, I thought it was more like Pacific Coast Bay, like like Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No. I've seen you at Corpus Christi. I know I have.
Yeah. I've been there. Does that count?
No.
No. It doesn't count for anything.
Yeah.
Oh man, which is why we all have our various sporting gear on tonight in celebration of everyone's favorite
training, right?
sport. Yeah, no shit. I've paid attention to spring training, which is something I never do. It's bad. It was
a long off season for you.
Oh Jesus, did you see Chris Berman changing pitchers today? That was embarrassing looking. Oh, look it up. Chris Berman was the coach of the Giants today at spring training. It was awful. It's awful looking. I don't know.
What?
Yeah, for fun. I guess it's on his bucket list. But besides getting drunk on Chardonnay and harassing women.
Baseball's become like just something anybody can play if it's on their bucket list. Oh,
I guess
you want a Super Bowl or whatever. Oh well, I'll go out for spring training.
Yeah.
That's
maybe they'll start like I've been telling them for years to put me in to like tell people how to do that. So make a petition for like booksellers managing a game. The Giants didn't do so well last year, so like, what's one game? Give me like the fifth starter, and like just let me make the lineup. Let me go out there, sit in the dugout, spit a lot, yell at people.
There was an article. This is pretty far away from physics of sorrow, but we'll get there, guys. We'll get there. There's an article by Sam Miller at ESPN about like would you actually play in one full major league game if like you had to play the outfield or whatever position, you'd probably end up in left field because they try and hide you. And you'd have to play the entire game. You'd have to take all your at bats, and you'd have to just go through the whole experience. And he's like, I don't think people would want to do this. And like most people chose on the poll that they'd want to, but he went through all like the ramifications of like, you would shit yourself the second that a curveball came in. The second there's a fly ball, you're gonna miss at least like half of them, and everyone's gonna be yelling at you. The other players are gonna be embarrassed about you because you're like screwing up their whole reputation and just a joke. Like it would be a horrible experience.
No, man, I was playing catch with like a minor league, like washed up player once, and he was like, just go catch for a second. I was like, no, man, I'm not catching. I don't have any gear. And he's like, no, I'm just gonna I'll throw it soft. And he threw like a 70-mile-an-hour knuckleball. And I've never seen a ball do that. And it was like the most terrifying thing. And I bailed, and I had like a bruise on my arm for like a week. That you just saw the stitches. He barely threw it, but this ball did not, like a knuckleball. Come on, man. We're playing catch in the park. We're not friends anymore.
Yeah, screw that guy. Oh man. So anyway. I suppose we should talk a little bit about this book, or at least start on it. Yeah. So the book, The Physics of Sorrow by Georgi Gospodinov. This week we're talking about part 3, which last week we talked a lot about eating children, which was great. And that was a very short section. But this time we've got the Yellow House, which in my crazy attempt to summarize it, this section is very hard to summarize. Like we have a lot of books that are difficult to kind of encapsulate, but this one in particular just starts from this idea of this sort of insane asylum, Yellow House, where there's this screaming inside, and our narrator Georgi can like go into people's memories, comes up with the idea that he has a brother who is the Minotaur who's being housed somewhere else. And then it just kind of goes through some of his memories, goes off into side tangents about the 80s, about things that he did growing up, about sex, about socialism, just sort of laying the groundwork of his own existence before it ends with a longer section about his friend Gaustine, who's the one that we'd mentioned before, that in the epigraphy has 2 different quotes from 2 different seemingly time periods, but that neither one of which is real, and that he's a character that's invented. And even in this section, Gospodinov references that he writes more about him in a book called And Other Stories, which is a real book that was published by Northwestern, which does include a story called Gaustine. So he's in there. But what were your general impressions? And actually, Nick, to back up for 1 second, did you read this book before doing this podcast? Are you familiar with this already, or were you?
Oh no, I read this book. You sent me the galley years ago. I mean, I actually was reading this book when I went for my interview with Book Culture. This is what I was reading. So when they were like, "What are you reading?" and I was like, "Oh, well, of course, I'm reading Physics of Sorrow." And they're like,
hired.
And they were like, "What is that?" and then they were like, "Oh yeah, open letter, sure." No, no, that's not true. No, but it was like I just happened to be reading it because I picked it up at the Strand, like, or you had sent it to me actually, probably. That makes more sense. But yeah, so I was full like 3/4 of the way through this, reading it at home, like in between jobs, and it was just like, man, it was kicking my ass. You know, it was like such a trip to get into your own head when you're reading this book, and you're in a weird place already. Yeah. So like I wasn't even about ready to talk about it in an interview of like, oh, what's it about? Like, oh, what's that book you're reading? And I was just like, yeah, it's about like a minotaur and some labyrinths and some crazy shit, you know? Like, so
that's the elevator pitch.
One of the reasons I like choosing this chapter for this podcast, other than it wasn't right away after you asked me to do it, because I had to revisit the book, was because this is a really interesting chapter. I mean, this is really where it really takes a weird turn.
Yeah.
Not weird, but like a very, very like interesting term as far as the character goes, because all of a sudden everything you thought was like just straightforward, like just turns you like himself, and none of it seems false. None of it seems like you had, you know, a narrator who was lying to you or anything like that. It was just like all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, there's way more to this story. And I think it really pushes you through to the end of the novel and really like keeps you there, because there's a lot of people who'd be thrown off by the style of this, by, you know, the format and things like that. But I think, you know, if you hit this point, like the minute that chapter begins, you're in, you know?
I totally agree. And Brian, you said you thought this was the section where it really hit its stride.
Yeah, to me, it started feeling like a more natural, it just felt natural for Georgi or whoever's actually writing this, like it just, to me, just like the voice started to click a little bit more for me right here.
Yeah.
It just felt natural. Like, okay, this is gonna like the real mode of storytelling.
Right. Yeah. It does start to have more of a rhythm to it, I think, and like it's a little bit more fleshed out because that first section is really dropping you in as to bouncing around and telling that grandfather story, and then we have that whole myth bit, and then this is finally like
it has voice. Talking. Yeah, there's voice and juice and and
immediacy. You know, there's something like very in the place, in the time.
Yeah,
that's really, I think, important to the story and to the character or the narrator at least. You know, even to the point I was rereading it just to like make my notes because it has been a little while. And my first one was, what is the Bulgarian word for podunk town?
That's what I did too.
Did you? Because I was like, that is like the best translation ever. Is that podunk comes up like multiple times in this.
So right there. Curious what the original was.
Mine's like on the back of a burrito flyer.
Yeah, that works. Yeah,
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I wonder what that is. We'll talk to Angela. I'm sure that there's like, you know, something, but podunk is a really specific kind of American word.
Yeah, I mean it is, and I will like. I mean, but it's a good choice because you don't find that it's like, it really only stood out to me this time because I was looking for something interesting to say because I wasn't sure how this was going to go because I've never done it before. But I mean, it's really interesting because when you're looking at translation, especially, you know, when I don't read Bulgarian, I texted my friend who spent a couple years in Bulgaria, but he didn't get back to me as to what the translation for podunk would be. But it's interesting, you know, like I always think about this, like what you're missing in translation. And this is one of those books where like, there's obviously more to this. I mean, it's so deep and there's so many levels going on, you know, like, especially in this chapter with his father, his grandfather, the supposed twin brother, you know, all the way through to like weird lists of collections and things like that, you know, that I think are like really important to the story. And I just wonder sometimes if there's something that I'm missing, you know?
Yeah, the other part that I marked as like a translation question was on 100 when it's talking about the woman who believes that Elaine, whatever his last name is, Delon's going to come and marry her.
Oh, yeah.
And he's reading like the joke a letter. So like for anyone who hasn't read this that's listening, this woman like hangs out at the movie theater, believes that Elaine how do you say that actually? Does anyone know? Delon?
I mean, I said Delon, but
Delon? Elaine Delon, good enough, is going to come and marry her, and she's in love with him, and she's crazy, and people decide to play prank on her and send her a letter from him because she's always writing him letters. And so she gets a letter, and she's illiterate. So Georgi's reading it to her, and it's like, to my heart's true love, blah, 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 blah. And then she says something about the Ditzy MD, and he says, I silently replaced Ditzy with Ritzy. And I wonder what that would have been in the original too, because that rhymes so well and works so well here, but it wouldn't have to rhyme. It wouldn't have to be that single.
No, of course. No, that's cool. Interesting. Well, even just talking about his name and the pronunciation, you know, on the other page, I caught it says Delon's cologne. So you wonder if the pronunciation really is Delon, and that is like a purposeful like translation of what cologne might be, or if they say cologne in Bulgaria, you know, like, I don't know. It's interesting.
That was one thing with the movie section, not to jump way around, but there's a lot of movie stuff in here where he talks about like the cowboy and Indian movies, the Westerns. And I love that because that's something I'd heard so many times about how in the Soviet Union and in Germany, the Reds were always the good guys. So the Indians are always good because they're Reds, you know, and that and the Cowboys are bad because they're like the white imperialist. You know, person.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who would agree with you these days that that's true still.
Yeah.
It's just mostly.
That jumped out to me as well. Like, it was interesting. Like, like you always, you know, who wears the white hat, who wears the black hat, right? Good guys and bad guys or whatever. And like this complete
bad.
Yeah, like this complete different way of looking at something. It was I don't know why, but I watched the end of the Oscars last night. And
I had to watch
the whole thing. And he says, I grew up watching foreign films like E.T. and
that was awesome.
I love that. Right?
That was a great line. Yeah,
it was such a cool way of thinking about the world. Like, oh yeah, you know, there's different points of view.
Yeah, well, there's a new book not to plug another book from another publishing company, but
oh my goodness,
I know about this. I know what book you're gonna say.
I'm gonna say it because I'm all about this book. There by Tommy Orange.
Yep.
I've been passing it around through Winter Institute, and he's a good kid. It's his first novel, but it is the Native American urban experience in Oakland, like, and Oklahoma, like kind of going through like modern tribal stuff. But like he lays it out. I mean, he lays it out, and I think it ties into something like this, you know, like where, you know, as Americans, we believe in this, like, we were always right.
Yeah.
We made this country and we're still going through this shit, you know, but I think it's a good book, worth a read. Doesn't really tie in necessarily other than we were talking about.
I really want to read that, but I couldn't get it at Winter Institute because there's too long of a line.
I will send you a copy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Brian, you should get one too. You are part of that.
Yeah, man, I'm a card carrying, believe it or not, even though I'm very pale. Yeah.
No, it's awesome. It's a really good book, and I think it's going to be a really important novel for a long time to come.
Awesome.
In terms of that too, I think it was Joshua Cohen that told me this once, where he was talking about these Westerns that are like inverted especially in communist countries. And I believe he told me too that there was a whole string of books from the Soviet Union that were romances that were based on Southern plantation romances, but were all like, that was the only way that the writers understood of like America and romance was like Gone with the Wind. And it was just like this kind of batshit way of like understanding like that type of writing. But I kind of love those, like these restricted. I mean, we live in a country that prides itself on having open access to all these things, and whether it does or not is another question. But to have come from a country in which you get so little in that you get like one example, and that becomes the example that represents the whole.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That was also another neat thing I considered with this chapter too, is it keeps kind of harping in and like hammering home this kind of theme of empathy and understanding.
Yeah.
Right. Like, obviously we've talked about, you know, the Minotaur is, you know, half human, half monster, but like it's half human, right? Like, and it doesn't want to be a monster, but it just has to be, or whatever. Like, and the narrator is always, you know, feeling bad for the Minotaur, and just like this whole idea of what communism's like we didn't choose to be communists; it just happened to us. We're sitting here, like, what the hell are we supposed to do? Like,
well, and the interesting thing is in this chapter is like he immediately switches to where not only could there be a Minotaur who's locked up in the yellow house, but that it could be his brother.
Yeah, it could be my
dad could be taking care of him. That it could be, you know, like there's all these, like he immediately then all of a sudden becomes really personalized with the Minotaur. That, you know, I mean, it hadn't really led up to that, and it was a nice twist because it wasn't this other realm. It wasn't myth. It was like it made it very real and very personal and psychological, you know, like he starts, you know, zoning out, things like that. There's like different, you know, where is he the Minotaur? Is there a second brother? Yeah. Why is he by this house? You know, there's like all these questions that come up that like obviously later, you know, come out throughout the book, but like it's really interesting that way, you know, that
like page 75, I started feeling kind of some of that, like where that voice starts coming in, there's more playfulness when there's the diagnosis, and perhaps made up on the spot, which went more or less like this: pathological empathy or obsessive empathetic somatic syndrome. Like just making up like these weird, like just having fun, like, you know, it's very playful and fun, but it still gets back to that heart of like love and understanding, and you know.
And he does tie that to like those his ability through his empathy or whatever to go into people's minds and inhabit their past and inhabit their memories, and then ties that right directly to writing and the act of writing with that section from the possibly real Journal of Community and Cortex, which I don't think is real. I can't imagine that's real.
I hope it's not real. That better be made up.
It has to be made up. But that theory is real. That like when you read books and you experience them, that's what that really drives empathy or creates better empathy in people. So it does tie right back into those two things too. Of, I mean, like,
since it is three white dudes, you have to mention David Foster Wallace. The whole what is it, like reading and writing? It's the cure for existential loneliness, right? Like just like it says here, like researchers believe that the consciousness cultivation of empathy, including through the reading of novels, will make communication far easier and will save us from future world cataclysms. Yeah, again, like just fun. It just feels like he's having a lot of fun in this section. It's like
I mean, I feel like this is the way he wanted. I mean, I feel like it's the way the novel plays out in the long run, anyway.
Okay.
As a very enjoyable novel, but like I don't think it starts that way because I think there's a very specific introduction that we go through before we get to this. But this is like, this is where he really breaks all form. I mean, you know, down to even like photographs that, you know, like and you know, interesting like random quotes and shifts in form and things like that. And I think even though it does start out with that, but it mostly shifts between like myth and memoir and memory, and then this like really just breaks that plane.
I feel like the first parts too, like he has to have like that more serious loaded stuff because it is Eastern Europe and it is and it is a place that's been ravaged by wars, and like you have to address that again, I guess. And setting that up and then setting up the myth section with the Minotaur and all like what we talked about last week of like the father-son problems or father-children problems. Parent-children problems, I guess.
Abandonment and eating them. That's all it is. So,
abandonment, eating.
What problems? You eat them or you abandon them? Hey, good luck with your new kid coming.
It could happen any second, and I'm gonna eat him.
Try not to eat them.
I mean, you might. You were talking about drinking Jameson in the waiting room, so you might be like a little hungry. So
you know, well, they give you when he comes out, they have the umbilical cord, and you can just like gnaw on it and just rip right through that. You don't have to even cut it. You can just do it with your teeth.
Or like the placenta treat or whatever, right?
Yeah, right on. Exactly. I know what all of this is. One thing I wanted to ask you guys too. There's a bit about the movie theater because there's a lot of movie stuff in here, but the movie theater being like this kind of like almost church-like atmosphere of like it's always, and this happens in so many authors' books, especially of this era where like movies and the idea of movies, like Manuel Puig comes to mind especially, but like there's that image of like these things that are so glorious and glamorous, and it's such a specific atmosphere, and going to the movies is such a huge integral part of people's lives at these times. What do you think that's a trope that's gonna continue in the future? Because I'm trying to envision like a millennial writing about a movie theater, and I can't. Like I figure they're just gonna write about Netflix.
I mean, like coming from like when I started school, like when I was in junior high school, I was always going to the movies. Mm-hmm. Planned on becoming a film student and a filmmaker. I did the film student part, then realized it's a lot of work. Like, I'd rather just make YouTube videos and like no. But the funny thing is like one of the things, you know, one of my favorite movies is Cinema Paradiso, you know, and it's like the idea of, you know, there was one movie theater, you know, that like, you know, we live in America where you know, depending on where the movie's playing, there's multiplexes where you go. I think as we see the internet slowly take over movies, you know, you see some things do well in the box office, but, you know, they're paying money to have movies go straight to Netflix and things like that. You know, I think you lose the beauty of what the movie theater used to be, which is you went to the movies because that was a thing people did at night, you know, like the moviegoer. Walter Person, it's out of print right now.
Are you serious?
Yeah. It is out of print right now. The Moviegoer, it's like one of like the most beautiful books, and it's about that experience of American experiencing the movies. And right now, it is currently out of print. I mean, maybe not the most beautiful book about Americans, but you know, like.
But yeah,
I mean, I went to order it for somebody the other day, and it's like for a professor, and it's out of print.
It was like published by HarperCollins, I think.
What's that?
Wasn't it published by like HarperCollins?
Yeah, yeah.
Like you can keep that in print. Like
it's not that hard. No. It doesn't take a lot of money.
I mean, I've seen shit that they publish. Like they should put some of those books on in print.
Yeah, well.
But I wonder, like related to this too, or tying those two things together, like that idea of going to the movies or that experience is so much more communal in a lot of these. Like you go to the theater, you have that experience of the crowd. There's the empathy with the characters, but also with each other as you're experiencing that. And we are losing some of that by everyone binge watching the same Netflix show and then maybe talking about it on some forum.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like simpler than that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go please.
I was just thinking, even like I wrote a short story about a couple that get in a fight at a video store,
Yeah.
And depending on the age of the person reading it, they may have never had the experience of going to a video store. If you think about it,
well. Did you read John Darnell's last book? I mean, that only came out a year ago, and the main character is a guy working at a video store, and somebody returns a movie, and there's like a snuff film spliced into the video, and it's like, I mean, it's pretty ballsy that they printed it, that FSG printed it, that he wrote it, because I don't think any kid working for me under the age of a certain age has been to the video store since they were like really young, because they went out pretty quick, like in the early 2000s. So.
But even the whole thing about community, like the feeling of like, oh shoot, I know this one's going to be released on video this weekend, so let's get there early so we can get a copy of it. Yeah. Otherwise, it'll be out, and I'll be stuck getting like a Jean-Claude Van Damme film or something. I don't want to get that.
Because you always pick up something else.
You're gonna get something, but like, oh man.
Now we're just like, I guess I'll rewatch.
Yeah.
For the 15th time or something.
nothing's not. Well, I guess Redbox. I guess if you go use Redbox, there's options of things not being there, but when it's everything's streaming, it's just available to everyone. Oh. We do every so often. My kids love it because you can just press the buttons and see what's there.
Yeah.
Sometimes they give you a free game. You never know. It's like a goddamn candy prize thing.
But that's how they get you. I mean, that's the whole thing, is you play these games that are supposedly free or whatever, and then you're like, oh, but I really wanted to see this. And they're like, yeah, but that's $15. And you're like, but it's digital. But you're paying nothing to warehouse this. You're paying nothing for
Yep.
I wonder if that community though still exists in like the more places, like the smaller theaters that do art films, or Well,
I think there's. I mean, I see people at my store that definitely like try and put together like, hey, we want to go see this movie. Let's get a bunch of people together. Mm-hmm. And all it looks like to me is a pain in the ass, and I have to hang out with people I already work with. No, I'm just kidding. No, but I mean, or somebody has Movie Pass, and so they can't buy their ticket ahead of time, But it's been a really big battle about that, Movie Pass, which should be bringing more people to the movie theater, but you can't pre-buy your ticket. So if you're going with a big group, can't save a seat, like things like that. But I would think still there's many cultures, many countries where they still don't have a lot of theaters and they don't get a lot of releases. America pumps out so many movies that how many don't even make it to the theaters? They just decide, oh, you know what? We made this movie. We're just going to put it straight to video and we'll sell it overseas or whatever. But like, it used to be making a movie meant something,
Gets a January release. You ever see what movies come out in January?
One of the coolest things about the Oscars was when Peele won the best screenplay, and he said, thank you for going and seeing this.
Yeah.
You guys yelling at the screen, you guys telling other people to go see it, like that was something, and that was what it's supposed to be. That was the interaction that, I think the movies are supposed to be. And I haven't, when I saw it at BAM, and it was like, that was how it was. It was super fun. It was crazy. Like people were yelling, people were into it. And it used to be an interaction, and now it's like, if you're chewing your popcorn too loud during Spider-Man, somebody's going to turn on you and cut you or something.
There was a story about this these people at a movie theater that beat up this 2-year-old girl. They like dumped popcorn on her and beat her with the empty popcorn tub because she was being too loud.
Jeez.
What?
Yeah,
I never saw that one.
It was over this weekend. It was this past weekend. It was one of the stupid things that come up in my Apple News feed.
The only one I saw was like a 2-year-old died at a Payless shoe store because a mirror fell on her.
What the fuck? Yeah, I saw that too. I
remember as a kid having to go to Payless. It was so like it sucked because all my friends were getting like Reebok pumps and Jordans, and like I got the Adidas that had 5 stripes on the side of the shoe. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna get so much fun up for this.
I remember we used to have JCPenney winners. JCPenney winner.
Why do you want to be a champion when you can be a winner?
You can be a winner.
I just feel like every time I'm in a Payless shoe stores, I can't find a mirror, so I don't even get it. Like, I can't even check out my secondhand shoes and what they look like. Can I rock them? I don't know.
I haven't been in there in so long.
Yeah. So what about that? The sexual question.
I marked that one too.
Yeah. Have you guys? I've never read The Godfather. Have you guys read The Godfather before?
Nope.
I've never read the book. No, I never read the book.
I mean, I've seen all the movies and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is the actual piece from that book. I find it that was hilarious. That was actually written that way.
I think it's so funny because it is so wild. And then that's the part that has what page is that on?
86.
Yeah.
I just want to get straight to it. It pulsated in her hand like an animal and almost weeping with grateful ecstasy. Weeping.
I like the end part where he's like, sex appeared to be a complicated acrobatic routine with hops, holds, lift, thrusts, first with one hand, tongue, then with the other. I would never learn.
I would never learn.
And then
at least in theory, I knew I had to do to reach that grateful ecstasy.
Did you guys have books like that when you were growing up that people passed around that were like the sex books?
No, not that I remember, really. I mean,
wasn't there the Seinfeld episode about Tropic of Cancer? Henry
Miller, that
Miller,
one's good,
right? Yeah. Like they're all passing around that in the locker room or whatever.
Yeah, and then Jerry it never got returned. So there's this whole thing where it's many years later, and he the library cops after him.
Yeah. No, because this is another thing too that's going to be completely dated, because now in an internet age, you can have whatever you want. But I like the idea though of this. In this time of repression, you find these different outlets for
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully that's still, will somehow be a norm where people aren't just shooting each other porn videos all the time, and instead they're showing. I think
you're just gonna stop us shooting each other.
Well, that'd be nice too.
That would be nice as well. We could start there. Start there.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to make it too weird, too political. No, I mean, I think there's something beautiful to this, and there's something very very youthful and innocent of the fact that he has no idea what this stuff means, but it opens their imaginations to no end. And it's just it's just this page from here, or from this French novel, and it's not really saying anything, but it's they're at that age where it's opening up their imagination, and I think it does leave a lot to wonder if that's going to be the same thing going forward or not.
Yeah, absolutely. We did have some of those books when I was growing up. I think I'm maybe a little older than you guys. That but they were really a lot, like at least 20 years.
I mean, come on, man.
Fair enough. No, but they had but they were really terrible books, like Piers Anthony. It's like a terrible science.
Oh, I read that. Yeah, I read that series when I was in fourth grade or something.
But I remember,
you're right. They were weird fantasy, but they did have a lot of that stuff going on.
Yeah, they had a lot of sexual descriptions, but they were just sci-fi-ish fantasy books, and you'd be like, oh, okay, whatever. No one's gonna look at this twice. Then you'd be like, whoa, that's crazy. But I remember stumbling upon Vox by Nicholson Baker at one point in time in high school, and that was the game changer, I think.
Yeah.
If anyone has not read that, it is literally a 100-page book of phone sex.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. On the list.
that's the next season.
Mine was I couldn't afford the really cool comic books. I wanted to get Image comic books, but they cost too much. So I just got old Conan the Barbarian. And so they were wannabe. It was wannabe Frank Frazzetti art work, where it's just buxom babes and loincloths, and that was the oh wow. Yeah. See, being poor has its great advantages.
Yeah, I think when the net goes down, we're all going to be left to our imaginations, and that'll be an interesting thing.
Can I go back to Conan the Barbarian, issue 232, or whatever was in the 25? Yeah, whatever's in the 25-cent bin that I got as a kid.
And
that's something nice too, finding those books that way.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of places where you can go and just find a random 25-cent novel anymore, or a 45-cent or $1, and just be pick it up, give it a chance.
Yeah. There's one of the used bookstores here in Rochester, Rick's Recycled Books, I believe, sells old pulpy used books like a normal bookstore, but also has VHS tapes in there that apparently like are
nice.
really like softcore Cinemax style movies.
Yeah, wait. So there's also a very good section here.
Is that why you texted me that you needed to find a VCR player?
It's true. It's true.
I was wondering what the hell that was about.
I don't even know how you would find a VCR anymore.
I mean,
just go to the Goodwill. I'm sure they're there.
Yeah, that's fair.
One of those awesome.
I'm sure they're like $200 on Etsy.
Yeah. I parted out my old RCA. This is a mix of a Magnavox. It's a
handcrafted.
Got sweet heads on it, man.
Yeah. Artisanal VCR.
You want to check out my steampunk VCR?
It's
got some. It has rattan and leather on the corner. It's pretty sweet. It's like, oh Jesus.
Oh man.
Oh, there's the line here too with all the masturbatory thing. All figure skating competitions.
I put that. Mark that. Ding.
Underwear ads. All figure skating competitions. It's just like you're right though. It's a very like funny, tender, honest. It's such a good section.
This is a section that reminds me of natural novel a bit in that way too, because natural novel has like a real earnestness to it, and it's a painful book, but it's also like very sweet at times and straightforward. I like that from that section, the part two where he's talking about the complex political context of the 80s, where it's like first kiss with a girl, Brezhnev dies, second kiss, different girl, Trenko dies, third kiss, Andropov dies. Am I killing them? First bumbling sex in the park, Chernobyl.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Whoops.
I mean, there's something interesting reading this, like, as someone who was a kid in the 80s who was thinking about the same things, but not with the same political ramifications, that is something that, like, it seems very natural and easy to me. And it would seem very, I remember I was in third grade while we were watching the Challenger take off.
Yep.
There's certain things that I remember very vividly, whereas this is like constant because they were going through so much constantly. And, it occurs so naturally in this, which I think is interesting because I think a lot of books you read, it's just straight like, this is the political strife. This is how it's coming down. And for him, it's just, this is part of everyday life that's just thrown in with his youth, with his childhood, with what's happening around him. And I find that there's something very honest and natural about it that's not questioning what's happening. Even with am I killing them?
Yeah.
That's such an innocent question that there's something very natural about it. And I think that's like why I really like this chapter. I mean, I really like how it leads into the rest of the novel. And
was it in the last chapter or the one before where there was like the bit about school and they asked for a letter that begins with C and he says church and they're like, no.
Oh, that
I think it was the first section.
Yeah,
God. I think it was
God. It was God, wasn't it?
She said, "How about government?"
Oh, right. That's what it was. Government, not communism. Yeah. And that's that is kind of that innocence again of just like just say the word, and they're like, no. Oh, wait, no.
Yeah. No. You're...
What did you say, Brian? I thought you were.
Oh, I really like the part too. A little bit later where he starts talking about the 90s being like the best 4 seconds from the 90s, and he starts talking about the 90s being like the greatest decade ever, right? And maybe it's just the age that we are, but I went down a 90s rabbit hole the last 3 days listening to like all these different old 90s albums and just thinking like, damn dude, you can't have this stuff anymore. Like
I never stopped listening to that stuff.
That's yeah.
Now I'm the
third
old
eye,
man. Now I'm
third eye blind, I assume, right?
Yeah, and
yeah,
definitely.
Sum 41 that counts as 90s, right?
Totally,
kind of fits in there.
No,
but think about how weird that is. Like in the same decade, like,
right.
Not that far from each other is like Dinosaur Jr. and Sum 41.
Right.
Like, whoa.
There's a huge difference between the early 90s and the late 90s in music.
Yeah.
It like tips over. But yeah, I found that line. It's yet despite everything, the 90s was the most lively, the best decade in which everything could have happened.
And it seems like it did.
Yeah, it kind of did. Yeah. And we were young for the last time then. I feel like that. I relate to that. that was when I was still young, and then it was just like, oh shit, now it's just like way gone.
Like 1990, you have Ween and Limp Bizkit.
Yeah,
just like, wow, what the hell? How is that possible?
Well,
yeah.
Or just like even look at something like what happened to hip hop and rap between the early 90s and late 90s. Like, holy crap! Like, yeah, it's just a weird decade.
Weird, yeah.
It absolutely is. That's in the section too that we didn't mention, but like the Gaustine part where his friend comes up with all these crazy schemes to like make a buck or to do a crazy scheme, which I kind of enjoy. Just even the concept of it doesn't even matter. It's just the concept of it's great. Like the movies for the poor bit ties into our like communal talk from earlier of like going to the movie where you're like all empathizing, and here they're just like, okay, you don't need to say the movie, you can't afford it, we'll just tell it to you.
Yeah.
For cheap.
I haven't read that short story though that you were talking about.
I read it. I read it probably 18 years ago, and I have no recollection of it.
I should check it out. That's an interesting aspect of it. Did you have to get, like from a publisher standpoint, I guess because it's translated, did you have to get permission for the photos and things like that, or was that all just?
No, the photos were all in there.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know where they came from. I think they're from him.
They're his?
I've never asked. It's not marked in our copyright page, but it came as a book, like, you know, as the whole thing. So my assumption was always that they were pictures that he put in there. Yeah. And then it's totally fine. Like the picture of the guy that's supposed to be the brother looks really strange in the way that it's printed, or like the focus of it. It's even like bent and curved. Like
I was gonna say it's slightly crooked, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think slightly crooked.
And the sky ones, he could have easily taken all of those.
Right. Well, I just wasn't sure. You know, it's like something interesting. It's like, I mean, when you got them, were they in color? Were they black and white? Were they just like this?
They were black and white, just like this.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
I could look back to make sure, because there probably is some correspondence about that, because they would have had to give them to us to place in there. I don't think Angela would have put them in there, but we took them from like the original.
You have an original copy from in Bulgarian?
I think we have the original Bulgarian. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and they're the one that you always have. You're supposed to get permission for, which we've never done for this either. Because Brian was asking if we got permission for the Godfather bit, but we didn't, and I don't think anyone would ever notice really.
I mean, you probably wouldn't have to, because he's quoting it and not just using it as a. Yeah, I mean, I did a lot with like copyright law for a little bit of stuff when I work doing like photocopies and stuff, and like you had to learn it really quickly because of what you can and can't copy. But I think if you quote it and you give reference to where it comes from, I think you're okay.
And it's not like it's dissuading someone from buying that book. Like you haven't gotten the whole book. But the one that does show up are lyrics. Lyrics are the one that you're always supposed to get permission for. Well,
because that came from the old lawsuits of people just ripping each other off and things like that. So that's where they pay big time for lawyers to make sure that you're not just full on stealing their songs. But
which we've never gotten any of those before either, because it's like I just figure like if they're really going to come after us for our like 700 copies sold, like you might, come on. But we did, when I figured out how to do these podcasts the way that we're doing them, where we're doing them through Google Hangouts and broadcasting them on YouTube, it uploaded all of our old 3% podcasts, and we have music episodes. And within like 24 hours, we got content. Those ones got taken down, the music episodes, and we were contacted for like violation of copyright stuff immediately.
Weird.
Yeah, like they have bots that must run and just picked out that like we ran 30 to 50 seconds of a song or more, and they just like, nope, can't do that.
So if I start singing Yellow Submarine right now,
totally, yeah,
this thing will be erased and nobody will ever have to.
Just bombs out. All of a sudden your screen just goes black.
I mean, it's funny, like we were talking about like the Green Apple commercials. Mm-hmm. And when people would come up with ideas, they'd be like, just throw some music to it. And at first, people were throwing, copyrighted music behind like an actual like video that we're just uploading to YouTube, and you'd think nobody was watching it. But every once in a while, you have one that like gets like 69,000 views, which is huge for a small bookstore, and you're like, yeah, we should try and find something that's we're not going to get sued over, since we have no like actual income to pay people for like copyright infringement. So, like I started finding like cheesy fake songs that sounded like something. Like they're like, we should have the Flight of the Bumblebee behind there, and I was like, well, here's this one. I was like,
it's all just a little off.
It's just like some kid on a recorder, It's like, perfect. That doesn't sound like a real song.
How about some royalty-free Yankee Doodle Dandy?
Well,
I mean, that's in 5 of them. It just got old after a while.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, anyways.
Yeah.
We should probably wrap up a bit because I'm probably gonna have to go to the hospital in a minute.
But we'll pick up when you get there, right?
Yeah. When we get there, I'll just we'll just zoom back in, lock it in.
No, this was super fun. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have to pick out. Do you have a favorite line from here?
Yeah, I do actually. It was funny because I wrote it when I was writing my notes. And it was in my most clandestine (parenthesis read secretly illegible handwriting). And it was funny to me because I was writing notes about this and I couldn't read half of them when I was doing it. And I was like, it's so great that he like has this, and I totally didn't write the page number, but it's somewhere near the beginning. But I feel like he does these great, brilliant little lines that are these little asides that don't really come to bear on anything that's part of the story, but they're what really makes it like one of the most beautiful books. That he has these brilliant lines that I think any editor in America would be like, write this out. It's overwritten. There's no reason to do this aside. But but that they're there, it's like him talking about the 90s. Like, it's comforting to me. It's like something I can totally see myself doing. And the fact that it's in there, I love it. Like, I love that those are in there.
It is. It's so fun.
Yeah.
Do you have one, Brian?
This one's just interesting because it's juvenile, it's funny, it's an interesting way of writing, and then it gives you that viewpoint of what it's like to be like in a completely different environment than America or whatever. It's on page 85.
Yep.
I remember the bomb shelter under the school gym where once a month we hid, quote, on alert. Ragged breathing in the dark, the backup lighting generator that didn't work anyway, the chaos, the scent of sweat and fear, the subsequent boasts of one fellow student who claimed to have, quote, bombed, i.e. grabbed the tits, in the jargon of the day, may it rest in peace, of our chemistry teacher in the dark by accident. He had been aiming for a different target.
Yeah.
I had that marked too.
Yeah,
there's just something like really, I mean, it's funny, obviously, like bombed. Okay, that's an interest, but just there's something honest and like there's something really sad about that too. Like that these kids are huddled in a dark basement and there's sweat and fear and they're grabbing each other and it's beautiful, really neat.
No, I mean he has this beautiful visceral writing. There's another one that I had written down, but I passed over it because it was super early. But it was it's on the first part of the Yellow House, and it says the fallen leaves blanketed the whole street, still emitting a faint scent of rot and acetone, which preceded the corpse of autumn. And
corpse
these
of
are
autumn, yeah.
These are like, I don't know. They're just things that you're like, man, that just gets it right there. And it's not like he's Hemingway where you're getting like paragraphs and paragraphs of this stuff that's like overbearing because there's so much else that like takes you in and out of it. But like it's just brilliant writing.
Yeah.
And if it was too much of it, like you'd miss the point of the book, like the seriousness behind it or the levity that can be in it, the nostalgia. But then there's lines like that which are just like, oh man, like I wish I wrote that line, like it's so good.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah.
I had the one that I had marked as like sort of juvenile too and melancholy. It's on 89 where he's talking about all the letters that he got from the one girl, and he's like, I find that like the opening lines are literally taken from the little tome Love Letters of Great Men, an innocent deception that I've only now discovered. This explains the lofty style. My love, I believe that fate is sheltering us. Transitions. But then the part that I marked was, or this, I want us to be happy again as we were on March 8th and 9th with 3 exclamation marks. What I wouldn't give to remember what happened on March 8th and 9th. Which is funny, but also is like, yeah, I bet you if you found like those letters that you wrote back in like elementary school or high school, it'd be exactly that.
Man, even notes I wrote on my phone like 2 nights ago, I'd love to remember where I came up with them, you know? What did I mean? Flurgan. Sounds great.
Oh my God. Absolutely. So.
No, it was great. It was fun revisiting this too.
Yeah, it really is. And that's like the joy of like this whole project that we're doing, of like going back to these books, because we read them. I feel like I read them so quick because we're like working on them and getting them like edited and proofed, and like some of that reading process is different than when you can just sit back and be like, oh, I'm just going to enjoy this and like talk about it for a little while and not worry about like what's spelled wrong.
As a bookseller, you know, you're enjoying a book, but you know, there's certain books you feel you should be invested in that you really want to stand behind, and you read them differently then. And this time I've definitely like enjoying it. Like I'm just reading it. You know, I came into it thinking like, oh, I have to do this podcast, but I just revisiting it. It's been really nice.
Yeah, it's super fun.
And we're also breaking out a new section like upstairs where we're emphasizing indie presses like Open Letter. Awesome. So we're going to have the whole info counter. We'll have new featured stuff. So we're finding backstock stuff and new release stuff that we're going to feature and do more staff favorites. And I'm going to write some more from that list that you had sent me.
Oh, right on. Right on.
We're getting people to be like more, you know, behind like writing this shelf talkers and everything and have that. So I'll send you that stuff when it's up in the next week or two. That's
fantastic. And you should put this on display and play the 2-month review over the speakers, which I recommended last week. And Brian said it was a bad idea. It's a good idea.
You know me, every idea is a bad idea and a good idea. So.
I just imagine you should just loop this episode so that people are just like, God damn it. Why is Nick everywhere?
Well, you know, here's the thing. One of the videos that I made for Green Apple was the worst experience of my life because I didn't come up with the idea and I didn't necessarily like the idea. And I was in it and my hair was like really long and terrible. And it was like an infomercial. So I'm always turning to the camera and I'm like, but wait, there's more. So like, but there were tons of takes and then I had to edit it. So I had to listen to myself over and over again. And it's like, and it was the most annoying thing I've ever done was listening to myself over and over again, like giving these cheesy lines that I just did not enjoy. Yeah. So you should watch that. Just check it out.
Which one is that one?
I can't even remember what book it's for.
The one on the Making of Fitzcarraldo is great.
That's one of my favorites. One of my favorites.
What do you say? You're in a tree.
Yeah. Yeah, we're up by Stowe Lake, and the whole emphasis was Roman, who had been originally shooting him, and he has his own film company now, was leaving Green Apple. So this was like our last one. And then Steven Sparks, of course, came up with the idea of what book we were going to do. And so the whole thing was that we were going to the cheesecake shop to get cheesesteaks to eat during the shooting of that. So like, that was really all it came down to. And then the rest of it, we just winged. Like somebody made like a construction paper top hat for me to wear.
Right.
At one point, like didn't make any sense. It had nothing to do with the book or the movie, but there I am in a tree, like eating a cheesecake and cacawing. Yeah. If there's anything that should go on my tombstone, it's caca.
Oh my God. I almost died there. I knew that was going to happen at least once.
Yeah. Well, there's had to, right?
After all the time that we spent in Memphis, I was pretty sure I knew what was bound to happen.
Man, that was a good trip. All right.
That was a very good trip. So anyways, well, thank you again. So where can so people can go to Book Culture to find you and buy all the books that you recommend in person, but they can also follow you on Twitter.
Yeah.
At Twitter, the Buzanski. And
and check out our blog at bookculture.com. Check out our Facebook and our Instagram. We're very active for all the stores. And and this thing will be up there soon too, I'm sure.
Awesome. And like, yeah, I know that we still have to do our Twitter joke. So you're supposed to tweet something so I can reply to you drunk.
I forgot about we weren't even drunk when we came up with that.
No, we weren't. But once we were, we just can never remember to do it. But every time every so often I'll be drunk and be like, I wonder if Nick's posted anything on Twitter, and you never have, so I never can do it. But
I'll start posting on Twitter more often.
Do it. Right. And Brian, everyone can find you at @BrianWood_.
Yes, sir.
And your book's coming out next year, and we'll plug it every single week. Do you have a new working title today?
Just I don't know. I got a year to think about it. So
I like the picture you sent of Pete Rose though. Pete Rose should be on the cover of your book in his underwear, in his tight underwear, just looking like a hairy caveman.
So oddly enough, I was Googling images of 1970s male underwear models. It's for research, all right? Don't judge me here. And
nobody's judging. We're just
for whatever reason, apparently Pete Rose did a jockey cover shoot or whatever in his underwear, holding a baseball bat, and he's just all hair, and he doesn't have a good body. It's amazing.
It's Pete Rose. He didn't need a good body.
It looks like this, man.
I've seen that picture. I have that baseball card.
This hair is insane. I think some of it is the pixelation of the photo, but it also just makes him look like just crazy. Yep. So
that's like forget the dad bod. That's the stepdad bod. It's just like, oh god.
Actually, that's what everybody should be going for. Is the Pete Rose bod.
Right on.
That's my new diet. The Pete Rose bod. It's got to be healthy, right?
Right. So if you see a book next year with a naked Pete Rose on the cover, pick that up. You might want to pick that up.
I hope it's sent to me where I just on the shelves.
Of course.
I will hand sell that book till the end of my life.
Just for the cover.
Just for the cover. Whatever is behind it, I won't check out. But
you're gonna watch it.
Who cares? Yeah. Oh my god. So well, thank you guys, and I'm sure I'll be texting you a bunch on March 29th when baseball starts.
Hey, congratulations on the upcoming birth.
Yeah, thank you. It should have happened by the next time we do this.
Awesome.
Cool. So next week we'll be doing part 4, which is Time Bomb, to be opened after the end of the world, and this one is also a bit longer. Goes from 119 to 150. So everyone who's tuning in, listen to us next week. You'll be able to catch us on YouTube again Monday night at 9, and otherwise all of the podcasts go live in the podcast form on Thursday morning. So
tell Chad to invite me back.
I will.
For more.
Right on.
All right, guys. All right, sounds good.